everyone. Well, it's time to replace the quarter panel on the Trans Am. This will be part of the restoration stage of the build on the electric Trans Am project. I'm going to cut off the old quarter panel and rear body panel because the car was improperly repaired after an accident back in the 80s. Whoever fixed the car pulled out the crushed quarter panel and rear body panel and then brazed on a new quarter panel, but they did a very poor job with the wrong materials. So I'm going to get rid of all the bad repairs and put on new parts on the car. Sort of. What I mean by sort of is that the parts I put on the car are used. I went to the junkyard and found the best 78 Trans Am they had on the property, inspected the right rear of the car thoroughly. When I was satisfied there was no damage to the parts I wanted, I took a Sawzall and cut out the whole right rear and rear body panel off of the car. The junkyard charged me $150 for the part. I then took it home, trimmed off all the inner guts that I didn't need, and then I installed it on the car. Let's go take a look how I did it. Wait, before we do that, remember to hit that like and subscribe button and share this video with someone that may be going through a similar project. Okay, let's go restore the Trans Am.
Okay, we're going to start by identifying where we want to cut the quarter panel. I take a red water marker and draw out the areas that I'm going to cut. I use a air hammer to cut out my quarter panels, so I want to make sure there's nothing on the back side that's going to get damaged when I start cutting the quarter panel off. Check out my trough, make sure there's no areas that I need to save. So we'll go in there, mark it all out, check, make sure there's nothing on the inside that we're going to damage that's going to interfere our cuts, and then we'll go ahead and hack this off. It'll be nice to cut this quarter panel away because we'll get rid of all these worms hanging out from the backside of the quarter panel from the old damage that happened back in the 80s. We also want to mark out the rear body panel where we're going to trim that. Identify that there's nothing on the back side that you're going to damage. I keep my trim lines close to my spot welds because I'm going to drill out all these spot welds, but I'll be using a special tool and I only have a certain amount of room to use with the tool to drill these spot welds out. I'll show you that later. So once we've identified where we're going to cut, we'll go ahead and cut off the panel. When I cut off the panel, I noticed some weirdness about it, and if you see, it looks like they overlap the quarter panel, new quarter panel, over the old quarter panel.
As I was removing the quarter panel, I noticed this piece right here underneath the quarter panel. I started looking at it. Somebody put a quarter panel on top of another quarter panel. That's not how you do body work. If we look down at the seams here, I was trying to get the pinch weld ready to drill out, and I got to the bottom so I could see all my welds down here, and they welded the quarter panel right on top of the old quarter panel. There's their seam. That should be one piece right there, not two pieces. You know, you really couldn't tell. Now that I know what I know, you can see right here is where their seam is. But I know that now. Back in 1991, I did not know that. So we're going to fix everything that somebody else did wrong on this car. We're going to make a much better Trans Am. It's always knew it was going to be a better Trans Am. You know, on the inside of the wheel well, they brazed the wheel well onto there. They didn't spot weld it. They didn't use a MIG welder. They just brazed it on. I'm sure this happened back in the 80s, and it was the technology they had back then. Well, we've got way better technology now, so we're going to do the job right. You know, that right there, quarter panel welded on top of another quarter panel.
Here's the drill I'm going to use to drill out all the spot welds. It's got a anvil on the end of it, and then the center of it comes out into the anvil, and then there's a collar on it that's adjustable. That allows you to set the depth, so you can go through 1 piece of metal, 2 pieces of metal, 3 pieces of metal. This way you don't damage the last piece of metal that you're trying to save. It's made by Spitzenagel, and it's sold by Dent Fix. It's a really handy tool. The drill bits are changeable in case you break them. I also put a air valve on it to adjust the speed on it, because with the drill bits, if you go too fast, sometimes you can burn the drill bits up. Let me just show you how this drill works. When you squeeze the trigger on the drill, the center of the drill actually comes out. It acts like a drill press, and so it puts a certain amount of pressure on the spot weld that you're trying to drill out, so you don't have to sit there and try to push on it and exert a lot of energy. That's why I like using this, is because it does all the work for you. You pull the trigger and it drills the spot welds out. Now that I've trimmed away the rear body panel, quarter panel, I can drill out the spot welds, which I've done here already. Now I'm going to take an air hammer and chisel out all the spot welds from the vehicle. This is an example of how I do it. This is not the rear body panel. This is another video for the future that I'll be sharing with you guys. Basically, all I'm doing is giving you an example of how I go in with an air hammer and chisel out the spot welds. Usually when you drill out a spot weld, there's still just a little bit of a corner left on it that has to be removed. And then so I'll just chisel around that spot weld, and it usually pops right off from the mating surface, so that you can get the rest of it removed. So here you can see I've chiseled off the rear body panel away from the rear body reinforcement. There's all the holes that I drilled out. And here's just from the other side, the back side of it, but you can see how it comes off pretty clean. I'll also have to chisel out around the tail lamp opening, so I'll drill those spot welds out, and then I will chisel this area off as well. With the rear body panel removed now, I can go ahead and grind all the spot welds, and each one will have a little bit of a nib around it where the old panel was. I'm going to grind that all up and clean it up and prep for the new quarter panel and rear body panel to go on. Here is my used part that I took off of another Trans Am, cleaned it all up, got ready. You can see that's supposed to be one piece. There is not 2 pieces there. That's what it's supposed to look like. And this is going to be a good part. Primered the inside of the quarter panel with epoxy primer. Got all the rust out of there. It's a good quarter panel. It's going to last. At this point, along with prepping the new used quarter panel, I also prepped the right outer wheelhouse and the DSE tub kit. I installed those into the vehicle, and you can see that on a prior video I did called Tubbing the TA. But I did the wheelhouses, I fixed the floor pan on the trunk. There was some rust spots there at the end of the frame rail, and so I cut the floor out and made a new patch for the floor right there, and then I welded it into place. This is the patch that I had made up for the car. Also in that Tubbing the TA video, you can see how I made a template and everything, and how I put it in place, welded it and everything. Now that I got all that stuff prepped, I'm going to go ahead and mock up the rear body panel. I want to make sure that this is kind of in the right place, and then once I mock up the rear body panel, I'm going to put the quarter panel on to test fit and mock that piece up as well. You want to make sure everything fits properly before you do any welding. So I go ahead and put the deck lid back on the car. I put the tail lamps back in the car. I reinstalled the rear bumper cover. Here again, I want to make sure everything is properly lined up and that my gaps look good. So at the end of the job, there's no question, I can just put things together. I also put the spoiler kit on the back of the Trans Am as well because I want to make sure the gaps on the spoiler kit look good. When I'm test fitting, I use a lot of clamps and I use a lot of screws. The clamps are good because you can shift things around as needed, and the screws, you can take them in and out a little bit to shift panels around as well. Like I said, it's super important to make sure you have the right gaps before you do any welding on the car. Once I was satisfied with my gaps and I knew I had good straight lines on everything, I went ahead and started welding on the car. I started on the sail panel and down the door opening, welded inside the wheel openings, and then along the rear body panel, the trunk trough, and then I also went ahead and welded the whole rear body panel onto the vehicle. Now this is where I had finished welding, and now I've ground my welds down, smoothed everything out, used a grinder with 36 grit, and then after that I moved on to 80 grit on a grinder, and then I used a flapper wheel to smooth everything out. I sanded down the used quarter panel. I got the paint job off of the car that was there originally when I got it from the junkyard. Took it down to its factory primer, and then I took it down just a little bit farther, making sure to get rid of all the defects, any scratches in the paint that were originally there, scratches that were deep into the primer. I wanted to make sure that I had a good surface to paint the quarter panel. Now I'm going to put epoxy primer on the quarter panel before I do any filler work on the car. Now this is normal. You kind of put your epoxy coat primer down first, and then you can go in, scuff the epoxy primer where you want to put your body filler, and then right on top of that, you just put your filler and start sanding everything. What this does, it makes a much corrosion resistant product at the end. Instead of having filler underneath the primer, you actually have filler on top of your primer, and it's a good mechanical adhesion. Epoxy primer makes a chemical adhesion to the metal, and then I sanded the epoxy primer with 180 grit, applied my body filler right on top of the epoxy primer, and then smoothed out my body filler. Now that I got my body filler all smoothed out, I went ahead and sanded the quarter panel with 400 grit to make it nice and smooth. And then I applied a coat of high build primer on top of that. And I probably applied 3 coats of high build primer because I'm going to block down the body work really good, so it's a nice finish. I'll probably add another coat of primer after I'm done, something that I can wet sand really good. Alright guys, that's it for this episode. Go ahead and check out my other episodes to see what I did so far, and make sure you stay tuned and watch my future episodes. We're going to start probably mocking up some suspension work pretty soon. Alright, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, share this with a friend, and you all stay safe out there, okay?